So I've been wondering, I've been thinking, in fact, it's been so serious that I've had to change my top. And one thing that I was remunerating on was, when you're a junior developer, right? I remember back in my day, coding used to be fun. Like, coding was one of those arts that you would stick with for a bit of time, right? Be it like a month, 2 months, 6 months. And it used to be fun because it was challenging. It used to be something that you would be creative enough to figure out. Like, I don't know what the variable was. I don't know what the type was, right? And I don't remember, what this particular structure in Terraform was, what I needed to use in my GitLab, my GitHub or GitLab setups for CI/CD, right? All of these things, right? And then we get AI, and I just don't feel the same using it. It's weird. I don't know if anybody else feels like that, right? Like, you do the code, you get the output, it kind of works, and it kind of doesn't. It loses some syntax somewhere. All these kind of trivial things that you could do with another prompt and get around. But it doesn't feel the same. It does that inherent need for accomplishment, that fulfillment when writing the code. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't hit the same way. And I'm wondering, do other developers feel this way? Because if that's so, then it makes me think that coding is becoming commoditized. And that is dangerous. That is very dangerous. Because it means that we're moving towards a world whereby productivity is just a means of creating code that doesn't necessarily work as intended, is unoptimized, and is insecure. Because, I'm thinking about the 10-year strategy, and I'm thinking nobody's going to understand what this code means. Nobody really is going to care. And maybe that's right? When we think about consumers utilizing our technology that we build, a lot of people are not going to care about the internal workings of what we build. They're only going to care about what's on the outside, right? UX designers and even internal testers will probably tell you the same thing, right? It's what on the outside. What is on the outside is probably more important than what's on the inside. Now, it's funny because if we link that back into spirituality, and self-improvement, a lot of people will say it's what's on the inside that matters, right? It's your internal state of being that creates the difference. So, in a weird juxtaposition, I wonder if we're seeing this sort of, we're building something that we don't really care about because we're using AI, we're using Cursor, Claude, these engines to build something. Now, I'm not saying it's incredibly wrong to use them. What I'm saying is there's an equinox that is being played here whereby the utilization of the tools is not giving that fulfillment that we originally had when we weren't using the tools, right? When we were using our brain power. And I've noticed it in my workflows, like I'm forgetting certain things that I used to know because I was doing them by hand at one point. The need for me to go back and find the information, get good at researching, problem solve through a problem, is now just one prompt. And I'm wondering, is this necessarily a good thing? And the research suggests otherwise because we see people like Amazon at the moment implementing heavy use of AI where they've had multiple outages at the same time. In fact, 3 over the last year. And it makes me think. Is this the right direction that we want the tech industry to go into? We want such an automated world, but we've had multiple instances whereby a lot of the leadership decisions have been questionable. And it's generally because they've had no coding background, they've never done a bit of coding in their life, they've never understood what it means to do coding without AI, and I don't even think half of them even have leadership qualities which perpetuate those who are actually doing the work, because they've never actually been at the bottom. The only person that I can think of who has even had that sort of level of experience is NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, because he worked at VLSI designing the chips, and he was also with AMD before he founded NVIDIA. Right? One of his first projects was with Sega. That was one of his first projects that he ever did, and the chip itself was fundamentally faulty because it wasn't matching the requirements. They turned around and said, look, this isn't fit for your purpose, but we need to take the investment because NVIDIA would go under. So Sega invested in Jensen Huang as opposed to NVIDIA, right? In the individual. Because the individual had something, or they saw something in Jensen that was superior to the product that he had output, right? But that might have been the times back then. Nowadays, not so much. You know, people are very untrusting right now. They're not very connected. And it does make me think that we are getting to this kind of dystopian world whereby, you know, is coding going to be a sustainable career, not only in the developer land, but also in the infrastructure land for the next 10 years? Because right now, you know, AI might not be coming for my job. But when I think about it, right, if you think about the level of advancement that happens within 10 years, or a decade, or 2 decades, maybe AI will be at that level where it's possible that it will take my job, right? Because it's progressed so much that the limitations that we thought of right now won't be a limitation going into the future. And this makes me so hesitant to go back into DevOps, you know, infrastructure, platform engineering, these kind of roles as a result. Because what I once knew is no longer the norm, because it would have been replaced with something which is far superior than my actual intellectual knowledge. And this is where it gets dangerous. This, I think, is where it's going to get difficult for a lot of people. And maybe the answer is stack different skills which are separate to DevOps and infrastructure, because that particular role may not exist in 10 years' time, to be frank. So it's a really difficult conversation to understand. I think security is going to be something which is going to increase. I think security is probably going to be where people funnel into, because AI guardrails aren't sufficient. Even in 10 years' time, I think, you know, is AI security going to be something which is going to be, you know, a real driver? Because something needs to be, you know, if it's a black box, as it's being said, then something needs to keep the guardrails in check for the artificial intelligence in order for it to execute commands correctly. And that is another problem in itself, because of the deception which comes with large language models and large reasoning models, whereby you can essentially confuse the AI into doing nefarious things. So, for example, there was a study which was conducted whereby a researcher deceived a Unitree robot by role-playing. And essentially, this particular researcher was attacked by the robot, shall we say. In fact, you can see it on YouTube. It's a very, very interesting piece. So it's very, very interesting. We're seeing even OpenAI's founder at the moment become very worried for multiple reasons, but none which are relevant to this particular video in terms of, you know, coding and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of people right now are worried. I think a lot of people are are just not really understanding the market. Like I just got off a phone call with a recruiter, and I said the same thing. Like, I do not really understand this market, because I went for an interview with a company, and I even asked them, where is this market going? What are we doing here? Like, you got quantum computers down in the lobby. You've got a security team. You've got all these people which are here looking at artificial intelligence, looking at all of these things. But every time that I try to understand where the market is going and try to, hone in on my skills, I'm not getting anything back. I'm not really understanding where this market is going. To just say AI, 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 but there's no understanding. Nobody really understands, what are the tools involved? What are the things which need to be addressed? Everyone is just jumping on this AI thing like it's the next thing since sliced bread, but has no breadth or any sort of, there's a lot of breadth, but not a lot of specificity in terms of, okay, well, what are you doing with AI? What is the sort of things that would be beneficial in my life that would make me want to say, oh, that's really cool. Like, we looked at OpenClaw in a couple of videos, right? But the problem with OpenClaw is that it's very insecure. Like, I don't want it having my personal data, right, being used to train a large language model. And a lot of these companies are doing exactly that, right? They're doing exactly that. In fact, Oracle's CEO has been on record saying that he wants GitHub private repositories being opened so that way the data can be trained to reach its full potential. Like, that is insane. Like, oh, to reach the full potential because, AI can scrape the internet, we need to have private repositories now public. No, they're private for a reason, my friend. They're private because companies have intellectual property in there which is strictly their own, amongst other things. Why would you need to have all of them public unless there's something in it for you? So I think in computer science it's quite a worrying time, but again, share your thoughts. I'd love to understand whether or not people are in the same position when it comes to coding in terms of this internal conflict. And it makes me think that, is it really worth pursuing, a career in IT right now? Is it really worth it? Like, yes, you can get a high salary. Yes, there are people who are doing a lot of good things in the world. But at the same time, I'm not seeing any reason anymore. Like, there's no passion. There's no, like I remember back when I was a kid, looking at people like Bill Gates, looking at people like Steve Jobs, right? And seeing the amount of passion that they had to go and help people, like to go and build a computer from scratch and say, I want to have one computer for everybody in the world, right? Bill Gates. And he achieved that dream. Now it's just, hello, go and buy my 10K course. What are you doing? Oh, I teach AI. What kind of AI do you teach? Oh, the one that you can find on every other YouTube video. About Veo 3 or Sora 2. Woo, look at me, fancy. I'm building some SHIT here. Oh, look. Woo, woo. All that kind of stuff. I'm sitting there thinking like, man, I can find this stuff for free on the internet. I can find these sort of things for free on the internet. Like, why would I... Like, who cares, bro? I'm going to be looking at different ways in which I can use AI, right? Like the more hidden things. That's the sort of thing I think where it comes in useful, right? Like the integration, right? The different ways in which the mechanics works behind AI. Because once I know the mechanics, I can then understand, well, okay, I can see what this thing is capable of doing. And I think that's more important nowadays in the world of AI. I think that is going to become a fundamental skill. Like, okay, I can see what this thing does. I have an idea of what is inside of this thing. And here's how it works. And it gets me thinking, like, if this goes into things like healthcare, the security implications will be enormous. We're having, patient data being trained upon. Do they give consent? Was there any GDPR or even HIPAA legislation being followed? Was there any guardrails in terms of security for these applications using artificial intelligence? And this is the sort of thing that I find particularly damning, and that's one of the reasons why I thought to myself, I better make a course or something to get that information out there, so that way people who are vibe coding have the basic knowledge from the industry, right? I'm coming from the industry, I'm 6 years in. That basic knowledge is so important to understand that, there are certain reasons and processes there for a reason. Is to make sure that we follow the legality. We don't get the information commissioner on us, right? Because if we did, and we were in violation of GDPR, it's 10% of revenue. 10% of revenue for your business. You're sitting there thinking that you're making 10K a month? Bro, 1K, right, of the revenue. So you're making 100 a year then, right? 120. You've just lost 12 grand. You lost £12,000 because of a lack of security and regulation control. Now you've ended up spending another 30,000 or 50,000 or 70,000 pounds on somebody who is an information person or consultant, right? A security analyst or engineer to help you with that problem. So your 10K a month is now worth, I don't know, 4K, 5K? When you could have just done the due diligence, you could have just looked at the information, worked with doctors, worked with actual people to say, what are the sort of things that are keeping you up at night that we need to be cautious about, or even going to the regulatory bodies and saying, these are the things which are difficult. So yeah, I hope this video has been useful. I hope it's been interesting. Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in terms of coding in the new age of AI, especially as that feeling, is sort of being conflicted, and especially, now that it's becoming more important than ever to understand the fundamentals and the security aspects around artificial intelligence coding. What these new people call vibe coding. So yeah, I hope it's been useful, and I hope to see you again soon.